the Knight's Tale podcast, we've had some of the most incredible stories, and this one is no different. Today's guest uncovers his blueprint to building his business, the Populous Group, that's now generating more than $600 million in revenue. Bobby Herrera wasn't given anything, but he was able to obtain everything his heart desired after being led by a strong family bond and principles that now guide his incredibly successful entrepreneurial career. His book, The Gift of Struggle, is packed with an insane amount of life lessons, and honestly, any one of the stories from the book is so powerful they could bring a tear to your eye, because in it, he talks about his childhood, his relationships with his family members, and some of the most difficult decisions he had to make in order to get to where he is today. The book teaches us that we all have leadership capabilities that we can tap into, and it also teaches us that the challenges we face can become the building blocks of our success. I'm really excited to share the conversation I had with the CEO of one of the largest employment firms in the world, retired U.S. Army veteran Bobby Herrera. Today we have Bobby Herrera, the CEO of the Populous Group, who is one of the most incredible entrepreneurs, especially in the talent space. And I'm really excited to have him here on the Nice Talk podcast. Bobby, thank you for being here. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm happy. I'm grateful. Tell the
That's
underdog,
awesome.
Robert. Good to connect with a fellow Robert.
Right, exactly. Always.
Unlike yourself, I'm only Robert when I'm in trouble, and it's never Bob. I'm not serious enough for Bob, so it's just Bobby.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, you co-founded the Populous Group in 2002, and one of the market leaders in the non-permanent workforce space. Why was it so important for you to write this book, and how has it made you a better business leader?
A couple of great questions in there. We were talking offline a little while ago. Writing a book, it wasn't on my list, Robert. And I'm a storyteller, and one of the things that makes my heart sing is telling stories to kids and to veterans out there who are trying to take control of their own story in a way that helps them sit back and reflect and say, hey, I can do it too. And throughout that journey, I had some people that I have tremendous respect for. They kept tapping me on the shoulder and telling me, hey, you gotta put some of these stories into a book. And I started that journey a couple years ago, and it launched last June. It's been a wonderful experience. It's helping a lot of people. I'm getting so much wonderful insight and feedback from people that are reaching out that it's helping. And how it's helped me personally, throughout that journey. I think one of the things that is incredibly important for any entrepreneur, any leader out there, is clarity. And I felt like I had a really good grip on the personal story and that I was narrating for myself and for my organization, Populous Group. Writing the book gave me even more clarity. And, without that clarity, you can't build trust. And, it's a pillar of building trust with, things that are important to you and those that you surround yourself with. So if you were to ask me how it served me personally the most, aside from, the fact that I wrote the book to give, and I wrote the book that I wish someone would have written for me, and, the impact that's had on others. But for me personally, in my business and in my own life, it's really helped me clarify the story that I'm narrating.
That's awesome. So I know a lot of people, and since you mentioned, some mentors that have came into your life, I know a lot of people are starving for some form of mentorship. And it seems like you've managed to attract the right people in your life at the right times. So were your mentors sought out, or were those people that became a part of your life after seeing that you were already a top performer?
Oh, yeah. I really appreciate that you asked that question, because, too often, like early on in my entrepreneurial and leadership journey, the narrative that I told myself, Robert, was that, I'd see these people that, they had some, whether it be financial success or, resume success, whatever you want to call it. Right. And the narrative that I would tell myself was that, yeah, you know what, they're too busy for me. They have too many people calling on them. They have, they don't have time for me. And that is one of the dumbest narratives that we can tell ourselves, because once I finally mustered up the courage to pick up the phone and start asking some of these people, like almost to the person, they would just be overwhelmingly open to, want to help me. And, we're all hardwired to help, but, the answer to your question was no. I picked up the phone, I called, I asked. I didn't always get a yes, but I always got some form of direction. And, that I've found that a very large majority of people tell themselves that same narrative that I was telling myself. It's like, hey, if climbing your own mountain, whatever mountain that is important to you, pick up the phone. Don't send
Right.
them a text. Don't send them an email. Pick up the phone. Right. So,
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And so growing up, I guess this is kind of a sidebar, but I played basketball and I was really good at imitating people.
mhm.
And so when I played basketball, I had the Allen Iverson crossover, you know, and that was just the thing back then. So in your book, you mentioned that you should be incredibly selective about the people that you follow. Why do you think that is? And, what was your reasoning for that?
Hey, well, hey, one, that was a sick crossover.
It really was.
And I tried to emulate it. I wasn't very successful personally. My brother Ed was, but I
Oh
wasn't.
man.
Um, well, I think I think it's pretty simple. It's not a real sexy answer, but for me, my criteria was simple when selecting people that I wanted to learn from. Was number one, you know, I think one of the single most important questions that we can ask ourselves in our own respective journey is, hey, who am I becoming?
Mm,
And I mean, that's a big question. And as part of that narrative that we're trying to write for our own story, we have to answer that question. Who am I becoming? Who am I? Well, if you're not incredibly selective with who you choose to learn from, it's going to impact the answer to that question.
mm,
So, first and foremost, I would only seek out people that believed what I believed, that had similar values, people that, I would introduce my wife to, my children to,
mm,
people that I would be proud to say I'm associated with.
mm,
Doesn't mean we did things the same way, because I think that's also part of being a good student is pick people that you really want to emulate, like Allen Iverson's crossover. Yet at the same time, most people that you pick can't give you everything that you need.
mm,
So, I would identify first and foremost, hey, what's the most important thing that I want to learn right now? And I would usually focus on a strength. It's like, for example, storytelling. And I would say, okay, I want to become a better storyteller. And then I would start zooming out and saying, who are the best storytellers out there? And I would fiercely study them. And I would study and I would do my homework before I reached out.
mm.
And, when I reached out, then I could say on that call, I could say, you know what? I've watched 4 hours of your storytelling videos. I've personally blocked aside 15 hours of my time to study your work. This is what I've done. This is how I've done it. I would like to know from you, hey, what do I need to do to earn 30 minutes from you to further learn how to be a better storyteller? You name it, I'll do it. So imagine for a moment someone calls you and says all that, Robert. What are you thinking on the other end of the line?
It's just time to serve this person. It's time to, be who I say I am.
Yeah, right. And if it was a basketball player, you'd be like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the court, right?
Exactly.
It's
Right.
like it makes you want to go right now. It's
Exactly.
like, hey, I'll be on my court in 2 weeks at this time. Meet me there,
Right.
right? Like, we want to help people that are hustling for themselves.
Right.
And yeah, so uh, I wanted to give a little bit of insight on how I did it. Going back to your first question, that you asked me how I picked my mentors and stuff, because it's all in how we approach people. It's all in the work that we're willing to do. And when someone approaches me, I want to know that they're also going to work just as hard as I'm willing to work for them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
I totally agree. So there seems to be a point in every entrepreneur's life when their minds just expand and they start thinking bigger, and the conversations go from thousands to millions, and that becomes the new normal. Um, you start removing and then you start removing yourself from processes and then insert employees. How did you approach that change, and was it difficult for you? Was it a challenge?
My approach, Robert, was always, hey, I'm going to do less but better, and and uh, I think one of it was, yeah, I'm I'm not I know my gifts and I'm an organizational nightmare. So if I try to do too much, it was going to be an absolute mess. And so, because I was real comfortable with the fact that, organization and having too many things going at once isn't my gift to the world, I would focus on, okay, less but better. And as part of that, I think it really helped me like hone in on being real concentrated on around one thing that I wanted to work on. And like that's just the way that my mind worked as I was approaching like my leadership development. The bigger your company gets, the bigger whatever it is that you're building.
Mhm.
I've actually, gone the other direction, and I look to zoom in on things that I'm working on, because things can get real out of hand very quickly. Everything that we say yes to, we're saying no to something else. And uh, does that make sense? I think
Yeah.
what I wanted to do is more give you insight in terms of how I think around things like that versus, um, trying to give a prescriptive that may not work for anyone else. Cause it's all situational, right? We're all in different stages.
Exactly. That's beautiful advice. So in this book, it seems like a guide for leaders of all ages and all levels of their career. But if we can zoom in on the transitioning veteran, what is one point of guidance that you would give to someone that thinks to themselves, that's not me, I can't do that, or man, that's going to be hard. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, those are the people that I love to connect with, because I'm a sucker for the underdog. That's how I end the book. All hail the underdog. That's my battle cry. And I, I think first and foremost, I'd probably tell them a couple of stories that would help them see, their own potential. Um, and if, with your permission, maybe I just tell you one of those, and
Please.
and then we can kind of answer the question, right? So I'll tell the bus story, right? Robert, when I was 17, my brother and I, we were on a return trip home from a basketball game, and along the way we stopped for dinner. Everybody unloaded off the bus except for me and my brother Ed. Well, a few moments after the team unloaded, one of the dads of the other players, he steps on board the bus. And as he's walking towards the back of the bus where Ed and I were sitting, he razzed me a little bit because Ed had outscored me that night. He was a much better hoop player than I was. And then he said something to me that I will always remember. Bobby, it would make me very happy if you would allow me to buy you boys dinner so that you can join the rest of the team. Nobody else has to know. All you have to do to thank me is do the same thing for another great kid just like you on this bus. And to this day, Robert, it's hard for me to explain that wave of gratitude and how I felt in that moment. I remember stepping off that bus, and outside of knowing that I wanted to raise my hand a year from then and join the Army, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew that I wanted my future to look different than my past. I'm one of 13 kids, and struggle had been the only consistent theme in my family story. And, although I had no idea what I was going to do, after that moment, I knew why. I would somehow, some way, figure out a way to create something that would allow me to pay forward that kind act to another kid like me who was born on the wrong side of the opportunity divide. So in other words, that moment, it gave me purpose, it gave me identity, it gave me something to believe in, and it helped me understand that, maybe someday my story will matter. And moment, man, it became the invisible force that drove me.
Mm.
And so I tell you that story for a couple of reasons. I mean, I think it's packed with lessons and humility and kindness, etc. However, I believe that every single one of us, we have a bus story inside of us. You know, we've at some point in time felt socially invisible. And if we look deep inside to one of those pillar moments, one of those marker moments in our life, there's a marker moment in our life where something gave us energy. It's given us something to believe in. And, you know, focus on that moment, focus on the energy that gives you. And you do that, figure out why, you can do whatever the heck you want. And so often when I tell that story to kids and, you know, veterans, et cetera, you know, I'll ask them, hey, tell me the invisible force that drives you. And, you know, take me back to the beginning. Take me back to one act of kindness that someone gave you that helped you see the world differently. And, you know, often I'll get some pretty compelling stories and they'll be like, yeah, that's why, you know, that moment's inside a lot of people. And that moment was inside of me. And there was nothing that was going to stop me from trying to figure out a way to pay forward that kind of act, Robert.
Wow, yeah, that's such a beautiful story. And honestly, when I read the book, I typically I love audiobooks. So at the time, I didn't necessarily find the audiobook at the time. But then I started reading the actual book, and that story being the first thing that you see on the page, that really just drew me in. And you know, it definitely caused an overflow of emotions at the time, because you're right, everybody does have their own bus story. So I really appreciate you for sharing that. I'm sure that never gets old, right?
No, you know, yeah, one, thank you for the kind compliment. And, you know, it's a marker story in my journey. You know, I share it with people. It's just packed with so many wonderful lessons. I mean, you think about that man that stepped on the bus. You know, there was an interesting backstory to that gentleman. You know, he was a real successful businessman in the community, Robert. And, you know, the narrative that I told myself was that, hey, people like him, they don't see kids like me.
Yeah.
And with one true act of kindness, not only did he show me that I was wrong, but he taught me that one of the most important parts of leadership is seeing and encouraging potential. That was the first time in my life that I felt seen. And I mean, the humility and the wisdom of him to, you know, to ask me to pay it forward to another kid like me, you know, you just, you know, I'm just so grateful that he came on that bus. And, you know, people often ask me, it's like, hey, well, what if he would have asked you differently? Or, you know, what if he would have, you know, wouldn't have said that, you know, what would he have done? And, you know, obviously I don't know, but I was a proud kid and, you know, I might've said no. And, you know, when I think about whether or not I would have figured it out on my own, that's not a real comfortable thought for me, Robert.
Mm.
And, you know, so, you know, you never know. You never know how one kind act can change a course for a gritty kid who has, you know, a big dream inside. And, you know, he did that for me.
That's amazing. Well, Bobby, I really appreciate your time. I know we're short on time, but thank you so much for sharing your story. And I hope to see you for the next book.
Hey, hell, the underdog. Let's keep doing some good out there, Robert. And thanks for helping me on your mission, man.
Absolutely. Thank you. Talk to you soon.